The Yucatán Peninsula, Mexico, 66 million years ago. A 6-mile-wide space rock smashes into Earth and sends billions of tons of rock and debris into the atmosphere, generating tsunamis that are a half a mile high. This apocalyptic impact kills 75% of all life on the planet and creates about 6,000 sinkholes and underwater cave systems known as cenotes.
Cenotes are one of the principal sources of water in the Yucatan. So all of the movement of water in the Yucatan, practically all the movement of water in the Yucatan occurs in the subsurface. A cenote is literally a hole in the ground, and it's usually flooded at the bottom. The ancient Mayans used the cenotes on the Yucatan Peninsula for a water supply. And the cenotes also have cultural significance because of the role that they played in Mayan religion and Mayan agriculture.
Cenotes were sacred to the ancient Mayan civilization, who existed in the region for about 3,500 years, starting around 2000 BC. These natural wells of fresh water were essential for growing crops and clean drinking water. In fact, one of the Mayans' most important cities on the Yucatan Peninsula was called Mayapan, and it was purposefully constructed around these vital water sources.
Mayapan was a really sprawling, beautiful city, built entirely inside a protective wall. And within that wall that surrounds it, there are a number of cenotes, which of course, if you're an ancient civilization looking for a fresh water supply, this would have been a phenomenal place to build your walled city and make sure that you contain all of those bodies of water. But what's really interesting is that there is one cenote that is outside the city walls. And this particular cenote is known as Sac Uayum, and it's not incidentally outside the city walls. The city walls actually zigzag in this really awkward way around this one pool of water.
Why would the ancient Mayans go through all the effort to build around this one cenote known as Sac Uayum? Perhaps answers can be found with strange tales that modern-day descendants of the Maya still tell to this day.
We've investigated dozens of cenotes across the site. There's several dozen within the city walls of Mayapan, but we began to hear stories about, this cenote that was outside of the city wall that seemed to be kind of deliberately excluded. There's several kind of stories I was hearing about Sac Uayum. It's guarded by this important and powerful being, that it was protected by a feathered serpent, that people had seen the feathered serpent up in the trees and watched it kind of fly up in the air and dive down into the cenote when they approached.
In 2013, anthropologist Bradley Russell and his team prepared to learn more about this storied cenote and its hidden secrets, and descended into Sac Uayum.
It's about 4 stories down to water. So we knew we were going to have to rappel in, get in the water, dive, and we noticed that there was a small opening. It was a tunnel that would lead us to something. So, you went from this large open chamber into this narrow tube, and then you pass through that and it opens up into this massive, beautiful, white-walled, gorgeous second chamber. It's filled with water the whole way to the ceiling. We began to explore that. We realized pretty quickly that there were human remains in the second chamber, including several skulls that are sitting just completely face up, staring right at you. It was unusual because there was no logical way that you could have put a body in there. We didn't really understand at first how there could be human remains in there. It turns out that the first chamber sits a little bit above a section of the lower chamber. And what seems to have happened was that the floor of the first chamber caved in, brought down stone in kind of a slope, and then human remains that are lighter than the rock settled out. When we analyze samples of the human remains back in the lab, we do a count that we call the minimum number of individuals, the MNI. And the MNI we came away with was like 19. So we know that there's close to a couple of dozen individuals that are there. And when we did radiocarbon dating on the bones that we had across that collection, they fell consistently about 1350 AD. We found that it was mixed age and mixed sex. So every member of society essentially was represented relatively equally.
The Mayans considered cenotes as the entryway to a place they called Xibalba, which was really their form of the underworld or hell. So cenotes were sacred places where, sure, there were accidental drownings, but there were also intentional sacrifice rituals, potentially to seek their gods to send water in a time of drought.